The Shropshire Canal runs from Coalport right next to the River Severn. It ascends up the 350-yard Hay Incline plane, across the Blists HILL, Tweedale, and then another ascent up the 600-yard Windmill incline plane, then meanders across to Aqueduct where it splits off and heads north to Donington. Also at this point it also branches off to Coalbrookdale via Lightmoor. Canal was decided by Act in 1788. By 1791 the canal network was completed. The work was overseen by Principal Engineer William Reynolds. I am standing at what is the start of the Shropshire Canal at Coalport. You can actually see the bed of the canal there, but also it is also the start of the Silkin Way, which starts here. So this is where our journey begins here. What we're going to do now is we're going to follow this part of the canal. Now what we do know is that this part of the canal was the terminus for the canal network. So why it was a terminus here is because you have the River Severn just over there, a little bit high today, but it was a great place to build a wharf. So you can see the bed of the canal there running just up there, and its first destination was Coalport. So we're now at the wharf area of where the River Severn is and the canal meets. So there's been a lot of speculation of how they actually got the goods from the actual canal down to the river. And a lot of thoughts have been given into this. What we do know is on recent excavations that they have found a mounting for a crane down there, so potentially they were down. But one of the main ideas, the thought is that they initially had the idea of having locks down here to take you down to the river. However, we also maybe believe that there was a small incline plane taking the goods down there as well. We don't know for sure. Anyway, so this is where the Coalport Wharf was. So this is where all of the goods that were brought down the canal were taken off or brought into the area. I would imagine this would have been very, very busy at one time. So what we'll do now is we will continue up the canal towards Coalport town. So as we reach this part of the canal, as you look up there, you can see this magnificent tree here. Well, this has got a bit of a story to it, to be perfectly honest with you, and this plaque here tells us all about it. So here you have this plaque here. So this was planted by Princess Margaret on the 29th of June 1970. So just at the side of me we have the Brewery Inn and their lovely beer garden there that actually overlooks the canal, which is here, and the river that's flowing just down there. But you've got this lovely greenway here. It's hard to think that we would be walking along the towpath of the canal, but the canal's still here. You can see it illustrated here with these brambles and nettles and things like that. So now you can start to see parts of the original towpath now, and if you look down there you can actually see a couple of the well, that's actually in place, the edge of the towpath now with these big sandstone blocks. This part of the canal is now interrupted by a housing estate here that was built by Shropshire Homes called Reynolds Wharf. Now it was built on the site of an existing factory. I think it was a matting factory, and obviously there's no public right of way. It says residents only, but obviously, as it said, this area is owned by the Brewery Inn. But you can see still we've got some of those at the edging stone to the canal. You can just see that now. If you look down there, you can just see the edging to the canal there, and one of the big metal things that held them together, look, as well. So We are now at the other end of Reynolds Wharf, and you can see how sympathetic these houses have been built. But as a crow flies, the canal would have come straight through here. So behind me is Coalport New Town. It was actually going to be in New Town initially, but I think there was a bit of issues with the clay and the quantities of clay required that it didn't quite, and work soon dwindled, and then they ended up moving to Stoke-on-Trent, which is the pottery mecca of the UK. Let's find out a little bit more about it. The Coalport China Works was founded by John Rose in 1796, trading as John Rose and Edward Blakeway and Co. By the 1800s, Coalport was one of Britain's largest china works, eventually closing in 1926. The Shropshire Canal came a few years earlier, but made this location a fantastic place to start a new business. As we head up to the made up section of the canal, you can actually see some of the original coping stones on the side here, and also they've been integrated over there as well. So as we come up to the Coalport section of the Shropshire Canal, this section of the canal has been lovingly restored by Telford Development Corporation. So let's go and walk along it and see a little bit more about it. So this grassy bank here, this would originally house one of the big wharf buildings where goods would have been saved and kept before they were shipped off all over the country. So here we are, Hay Incline Plain. Let's find out a little bit more. The Hay Incline was completed in 1793 to move industrial materials such as coal, limestone and iron ore from the other parts of the Shropshire Canal to the River Severn at Coalport. During the late 1700s, the plan was always to build a tunnel into the hillside to connect the canal via a shaft. However, this tunnel was unsuccessful when they found a rich seam of bitumen. The bitumen turned out to be a real asset, and eventually it was renamed the Tar Tunnel. After the failed tunnel attempt, they looked at new ways of getting materials from one part of the gorge to the other. In 1788, a competition was put forward to design something to be able to move material from the higher points of the Ironbridge Gorge to the lower point. Finally, Henry Williams and James Loudon, their design was chosen, and that set the precedent for another 6 incline planes in the East Shropshire area. What's interesting about the Hay Incline Plane was it originally didn't have these rails on it. The actual original rails were L-shaped rails, and these rails were actually laid by Telford Development Corporation on the restoration of this area. At the top of the incline plane, and we're on the hump right in the middle, look. So over there we have the engine house, which would have originally pulled the tugboats up over the top of this hump onto the actual incline plane. So as we look around, you can quite clearly see the hump. Now what that was used for is, the problem was with the early incline planes is that they were losing water down the incline itself. So what they decided to actually install a hump on it, which is this, what we've got now, this hump here. With the hump, that meant that they could pull the barges up to the top and then straight, and then put them on a cradle, and then away they go down the slope. So let's have a little look at that perspective. So we're now down the bottom between the walls, okay? So this would have been filled in with water, but you would also have had the cradle situated in there. You've got these big grooves in the wall there. They would have been to dam off a certain section or stop water from coming into it. So you'd be loaded onto the cradle here. The engine would pull you up to the top here. It'll pull you, and you can see some of the original rails here now. You can come, it'll pull you up to the top, and just like Alton Towers, you come up to the top, and then you'd have another one on the other side. So if you were full, you'd have one. If you were full and you were going down, there'll be one on the opposite side, so one would pull up the other. So we'll start to head along the canal now, and this will take us into Blists Hill and also Hills Lane, and further on to Tweedale. Here we have a dam on the canal. Now, what the purpose of this was to actually be able to dam certain sections of the canals off, because they were prone to leakages all the time, so they'd need to pump out a section into another one. But you can see how these timber boards are shaped just so they fit comfortably together and seal it perfectly. Here we are. We have the end of the canal. Now the canal runs over the Blists Hill car park, straight over, and that's where you'll be able to we'll be able to pick it up again. So I'm on the outskirts of Blists Hill now, and we pick up our canal journey just here. So we'll just get a little bit closer so you can see. Now over there you can see some warehouses there, as you see. Now those warehouses were almost right on the canal, and you can see that they're sort of a split level design, but the canal would have run right the way past those. And why Blists Hill was really important, because you had an ironworks here, you had a brick and tile works, you also had a colliery. There was a lot of industry going on here. I mean, it's a little bit different to the town that you see today, but you know, it would have been a hive of activity. Well, the canal now sort of drifts along and heads across the Blists Hill car park, which you will be able to see over there. And this is the back path that follows the fence. It's actually a really nice walk, and it actually takes you to the top of the incline plane. But over there you can see the car park, and it's literally running straight the way across there. And Blists Hill's a great place. It was devised by Telford Development Corporation, really to save some of Telford's most iconic buildings. Big dog. Save some of Telford's most iconic buildings, just to sort of show, you know, that they're not intent of just destroying everything. So there's buildings been taken from all over the place. The Stirchley School is in there, the Forest Glen Pavilion. These would have ordinarily have been demolished. So I think, you know, that's a real commitment to Telford Development Corporation. Here we are. The canal would have run straight the way past here, right along the car park here. Then it would have returned across here, where there's a small section of the canal in place. So let's go and take a look at that. So there you go, and this is what it's like here. Is you'll see little bits and pieces, but you can see here that you've got the canal there. You can see, looking down there, there's still a bit of water in that as well. Look, see, but actually this is the next section. So this now takes us to Hills Lane. So the pathway to the side here just follows the canal nicely. Down there is the bed of the canal. You can see it's down in quite a deep cutting now, but that is because over the other side there we have this, which is the Blists HILL pit mound. Now originally along this track that we're walking along, there would have been a little light tramway running backwards and forwards, because they were still filling in the top of the colliery with spoil. But over here was the Shorefield colliery, so that was another big colliery, and some remains of that are still to be seen just along the pathway here, and that would have had a lot of rails running in and out of it. And that's it. When you've got the industrial revolution going on, you really do need a plentiful supply of coal. You can see here now that you can see some of the brickwork. So this would have been around about the site of Shorefield Colliery, and there would have also have been a over this side there would have been a short, maybe a bridge or something running across. But you can actually see there how deep that canal is down there. It's a fair road way down, and then we're still following that along. So incidentally, you can see, look, if you look down there, you can actually see the canal has still got water in the bottom of it, look. And it's quite a wide section of canal, but then this area would have been very, very busy. More than likely lots of tugboats passing each other. But I was going back to Shorefield. Well, the Shorefield, actually one of those names were retained, and the word Shorefield Close was used. Originally, when Sutton Hill was built, obviously a lot of the streets were named all after S's, but when the Severn Walk area was redeveloped, they renamed the street Shorefield Close after the colliery. So that's quite apt, isn't it? So you can see there, look, you've got the canal base down there. So over here, so there's this whole wooded area here, as you can see, this whole wooded area. This would have been the site of Shorefield Colliery. So as we come round the corner now, the canal kind of stops, and what we think is that it did pretty much, we think that we actually go onto the bed of the canal down here, because this pathway is quite low. So I think what's happened here is the ground has been completely contoured. It's been completely contoured, and this would have been the bed of the canal what we will probably be walking on now. And why I think that is because there's a defined sort of tree line down here, as you can see, and the other side, that side, is all built up, you see. So I do think it was actually down here. But this is so the path we're walking down now is the path that runs from Sutton Hill to Madeley, and it sort of connects up and crosses the Silkin Way. We come around this corner now, you can see a large depression here in the ground. So I would have thought the canal would have come out into this kind of small sort of basin area, but what we do know is over this side the canal bed is right in front of us now, and we're going to sort of try and follow that again. So that might involve popping through some shrubs or some bushes in true style. So I know it's really hard to see, but you can see the depression in the ground now of where the canal came across. So there's now quite a clear channel all the way up now towards Hills Lane of where the canal ran. So where we're standing now would have been roughly where the site of the corn mill would have been, and this would have been accessed by a track down from St Michael's church, and that is where this used to be, again right beside the canal. So if I look around, you'll be able to see this distinct hedge line here. Now that is actually the bed of the canal in that hedge line, so let's go up and follow it and see what we can see. So we are sort of parallel with Legs Way at the moment, and our canal is in there. You can just see it down there. I mean, a lot of this route has been sort of clarified by the side-by-side maps and a reference point of exactly where we are. So we know roughly kind of where we're looking at. Here it gets interesting. So where we are now is we're just coming to the end of this section of the canal, and this has been sort of replaced by the path that runs up through Sutton Hill here. So we know the canal is down there, we've got that, but then it just disappears into the embankment, and then we don't see it then for a short while, but we'll still follow the exact path of it. So there's no further we can go here. So from here you can see the hedge line very, very clearly running across there. But here also was the site of the cement mill, and rumour has it that the cement mill stayed here for a long time. It was right near the canal, and it was actually used for some of the earlier housing and construction projects in Telford, but it couldn't keep up with demand, so I think they went elsewhere. Just behind that hedge there is the canal, as we've just followed up. So the canal now follows another hedge line. So we've got Hills Lane Colliery Pitman there, and Hills Lane over to the right hand side. Well, most of this was a colliery. So you can see the hedge line and the sort of grass track that runs up through the side there. So that was roughly the route of the canal. It was on this side. So let's go over there and see what's left. This area has changed over the years, and a lot of this has been filled in and soil dumped here from the nearby construction of Sutton Hill and levelled off. So we know that the canal would have actually been a lot lower than the level here. So you can see we're generally just climbing up on a mound at the moment. We're still following the canal now and still en route, and we're just coming past the play area and the mobile homes at Hills Lane. Right at the end of the BMX track, there's a small section of canal still there. So let's go through this little bit of shrubbery here and take a look. So there you go. You can see there we've got this big depression in the ground here, which goes down there. So this is the last section of the canal that wasn't filled in, and that's sort of cut off by the Kingdom Hall, which is on the road into Hills Lane. So unfortunately, we cannot go any further than that. So here you can see we've got Kingdom Hall, which is basically where the canal ends behind it. But as we look over, the canal went under a bridge, under this lane here, and then headed across towards Tweedale. We'll carry on following that route. Originally, this would have been flat and level mostly the way across here, and the reason being is they've obviously put a subway in here, and also the road from the Eastern Primary, from Cuckoo Oak to Madeley roundabout here. So obviously to dig a subway out, it needs to be a lot lower than the road level, so that explains that. But we are absolutely spot on following the canal now. So our next bridge that we go under will be the Prince Street Bridge. So the Prince Street Bridge is the Madeley to Shifnal road. It used to be a main road running right the way through originally, and you can see Prince Street there. So let's have a look at some telltale signs here. Well, what we have got is we've got the original wall there for the canal, and we would have imagined that the wall would have been built into the bridge that went under there. So let's get our bearings. So Miners Arms down there into Madeley, Cuckoo Oak down there to Shifnal. So we know now that the canal would have ran underneath a short little bridge here, alongside this building here, which is a mechanics garage, and along here. So we would be walking along the original towpath now. So the canal would have ran to, I would imagine, to the right of me now, and our next destination would have been the basin at Tweedale. Ahead now, you can start to see the Tweedale Industrial Estate, one of Dawley Development Corporation's first ever industrial estates, which really kick-started it off and gave people living in Sutton Hill and other areas their first jobs. So this would have been an amazing sight. I think if I was standing here on the canal, I'd be looking over, I'd be able to see the Windmill incline playing, heading and lots of tramways, but also a large canal basin over to the right hand side. Well, we will continue our journey on the other sides of the fence. So as we look ahead now, we would have seen two things. We would have had the incline plane in the far distance, which you wouldn't have been able to miss that because the pit mound would not have been covered in trees. But also on the right hand side, you would have had the wharf, which would be an area for the boats to come in and out of and sort themselves out. Incidentally, one of the interesting things about Tweedale is that when the Telford Development Corporation built this estate in the sort of mid to late 60s, they didn't kind of realise that it was built on a existing canal bed or a wharf, so they had to actually spend a whole lot more money on the foundations of these buildings. So anybody who really want to excavate these foundations of these buildings would find they're sort of super strong and super deep. So we're following our canal now, so we're in the middle of the Tweedale Industrial Estate. So the actual area would have been called Tweedale, and one of the estates has been named just over them, one of the newer ones, and that's been called Tweedale Wharf. So the canal from here took pretty much a very sort of straight straight run across. So I would be looking over here would be the wharf, and across there would have been a small tramway leading up an incline between the woods up the bank there, and that would have run straight off the canal there. So as we head out of Tweedale, it gets a little bit difficult to pinpoint where the canal is, but we'll do our best to locate it. So we're alongside the Bridge North Road, the A442, which ran pretty much Bridge North to Wellington and beyond, and we're heading up towards Brookside, and our canal is actually running across this area here, and it then goes underneath a tunnel. So we're almost walking through the wharf at the moment, and then it goes for under a small bridge and cuts across over there where you can see the Seven Gorge Caravan Park. I'm actually standing in the bed of the canal at the moment, and it would have gone underneath the road here and sort of crossed just where the bus stop is. Let's go and find the first remains. So this is kind of a little bit of a blink and you'll miss it. So the foliage here is quite it's quite overgrown, but we'll be able to sort of see very shortly where the canal came in underneath the bridge. So we're just coming across, we're just at the sides of the bus stop now. We're just kind of walking through, meandering our way. We're meandering our way through these bushes. Oh, don't you just love hawthorns? That's it, meandering our way through. That's it. Meandering our way through. Here we go. So now you can start to see the depression in the ground now. You can see there, if we look down, you can start to see the depression in the ground. It's just appearing now. If we head along a little bit, over the street, you'll be able to see the remnants of the canal there. So you can see the channel, we can basically see the channel running up there. So this is where it comes in here, look. So we're just going to go, well, I'm going to precariously go down there and then try and get onto the path of the canal. Inevitably, the canals were replaced by the railways, and a lot of the railways were built on existing canal beds. This railway you can see above where the railway bridge is, this is the Biltos power station line, and this actually cut the Windmill incline plane in half. Let's try and see if we can find where it came through. This particular area was part of the Halesfield Colliery area. So there was lots of tramways running through here, etc. But also the canal ran through, and the railway came, cut it completely off, and that would have been a great view of the incline plane from there. It would have been almost spectacular. So let's have a look where it was. Here we are. We've plotted it with two tree trunks here, but we know its exact location because of us plotting it with GPS, or as near to it. So you can see now what we've got. So over here we have the railway embankment. So that would have cut the incline plane off completely, but as straight as the crow flies, that would head us to the incline plane. So as we go across and we look this way, through here, we would have had the canal running through. A lot of the saplings, etc. have grown. So what would have happened here, we'd have had a lot of little tramways running up here, and predominantly this is the bottom half of the one of the Halesfield pit mounds. So yeah, Halesfield came quite a way across this area, even though it's classed as Tweeddale. So we need now to get on the other side of that railway and follow the course. So just to get our bearings of where we are, we're now on the road that leads up into Brookside, okay, Bridge North Road. There's the Queen Elizabeth Bridge there, you can see that running across the top there, that's the Eastern Primary, and you've got the railway there. In the middle is the services strip, so you can see the power cables, etc. running right the way through. But originally you would have seen the incline plane slicing right through the middle of that. So how do we get to the other side? So what we're going to do is we're going to come up the hill a little bit and cross over the road, and we're actually here. The original Telford bridleway runs across here. So this will take us to the other side of the incline plane. So here we are, we're actually on the top of the noise mound between the Eastern Primary and Brookside. You can see the Eastern Primary is down there, and this is the bridleway. So I know it's hard to see because we've got a lot of the shrubbery in the way, but straight across would have been the incline plane running across. So, and this path will take us to the, we'd be only about a quarter of a way up the incline plane now. Okay, so we're just coming down off the noise mound, and we are actually between Bishopdale and Blakemore on Brookside. So you might be thinking to yourself, Brookside? You're actually going on Brookside? Here we are, a quarter of the way up the incline plane. Now, as anybody knows, the roads of Bishopdale and Blakemore are quite steep roads all the way up, and Brookside is kind of built on the hill. So we know that the incline plane ran exactly up where the footpath runs today. So let's start our ascent up the incline plane. One of the common misconceptions about the Shropshire Canal is that it ran through the middle of the dip in Brookside. But actually what we do know is that this dip was actually just a quarry, and that's illustrated by a lot of the little crops of sandstone that are sticking out, and there is a great deal of sandstone kind of in the beds below here. So anyway, let's head up the incline plane. Windmill incline plane was definitely the longest at 448 metres, that's 600 yards, and a height of 127 feet. So here's a really good view of the dip. You can see the big sandstone outcrops over there, and one thing you can tell around about the canal area is there was a lot of hawthorn trees, and a lot of hawthorn trees are planted for boundaries, etc. And there just seems to be a lot in this area that have grown. For instance, you can see here, there you go, you've got 1, 2, 3, and they're almost smack bang in the line, on the line of the incline plane. So the incline plane is still climbing, we're still going. So we're now coming to the top of the incline plane. Okay, so what we do know now is the canal takes a right turn and heads off over towards Aqueduct. So we know that it comes between these trees. You can see we've got hawthorn again. And we have a very, very old hawthorn hedge there, look. So let's just get a little view back. So you can see the incline plane going down. So let's head over, let's carry on. Okay, continuing on. Now, our view, let's look at our view now. So, we're where the camera's pointing the canal heads, but if you look over to that way, you'll quite clearly see Windmill Farm and the windmill in the distance. And what's really cool is you can just see through the gap there. I don't know whether we can do it or not, but we can zoom in. But you can just see the Wrekin just through there. Look, see it? That prominent landmark. Anyway, let's head on. Let's carry on canal hunting. Now just ahead is a really prominent section of this canal where you can really start to see what we're dealing with. So remember what I said about the hawthorn hedges? Okay. So there you can see there we've got a nice bowl in the middle of that, and you can see that that is the bed of the canal. We've got the hawthorn hedges onto the right hand side there, but actually that's quite a good example of the canal bed running through Brookside. So on the oldest maps we can find, we know that a part of this canal from now to the other side of the school has disappeared and become a field. So that maybe a farmer has filled it in and ploughed it, etc. So we know that much. So we know, again, we've still got those hawthorn hedges, look. Okay, and these really lovely oak tree round the corner. There it is. So we're still on course. We're still on course with the canal. We've got another hawthorn there, look. So we know now that the canal diverts off over into the field that's called Plainfield. You can see the oak trees over there in a slight depression in the ground. We can't tell whether the canal actually went through that, because obviously that section of the map's missing because it is just a ploughed field. We are now walking down the old field boundary that ran through Brookside. It is edged with these beautiful hawthorn trees. On the left hand side would have been the canal in the field, which is roughly where Burnside is now. The area of Brookside was built on fields from the Windmill farm.
Only later did the primary school get renamed Windmill Primary.
So we come back on the map now, so we do know that the canal takes a corner here. You can see this lovely beautiful tree which would have been at the side of it here. As we come down. So this brings us on to Brookside Avenue now, okay, and we're going to head now, it heads across now into Lambeth Drive. So we all need to cross the road. As we come into Lambeth Drive, what we do know is the canal pretty much followed the route of the road. We know now that it takes a turn now up here. Now you can see this line of trees running down here, so we're going to head down that way, but it's more than likely the canal would have ran at the bottom of the gardens of Chapman's Close. So we will walk through here because it's pretty much the straightest route. What's nice to see here is that the residents of Chapman's Close feel the need to throw all of their rubbish over the fence. But still, nice coppice of trees running through here, isn't there? All in a straight line. So this pathway kind of brings us to the end of our leg of this part of the canal journey. Where I'm standing now would have been an important junction in the canal network. So we've made that journey from Coalport to Aqueduct, and where I'm standing now would have been one of the junctions. So if we were looking up north now, we know that the canal would take us to Trench. If we look south, we know that the canal would have twisted along over the top of the aqueduct, and then that would have taken us to Cherry Tree Hill via Doseley and Lightmoor. So that's part one of this canal journey. Hope you've enjoyed the journey. That has certainly been interesting. That's the first leg of the journey. So we've travelled. We started off in Coalport, we came up the incline plane, followed through Blists HILL, and then into Hills Lane. Then we come into Tweedale, then we come up the Windmill incline plane, we came through Brookside, and finally arriving at Aqueduct. Well, the next leg, when you join us, we will be looking at the route from Aqueduct all the way through to Cherry Tree Hill, and this canal was designed just for the ironworks. So join us on that very soon from Telford Ultimate Guide.